Good afternoon, everybody. So you probably have just finished watching your video lesson for our first geometry lesson. We are going to begin talking about 2D shapes today. Now, in your lesson, the teacher went over different attributes of shapes. And we know that attributes are the characteristics of a shape. And there were 3 different attributes that she talked about. She talked about open or closed, the number of straight sides the shape has, and the number of corners. Now, in that video, she didn't talk specifically about a lot of different shapes, more so just noticing the attributes on the shape. So we're gonna dive a little bit deeper because y'all are so smart. And we're gonna talk about specific shapes, just like the 2D shapes I have on my paper right here. And we're gonna talk about the different things that that shape must have to be that shape, the different attributes that make that shape that particular shape. So let's go down our list. So our first 2D shape is a square. I'm going to go ahead and draw my picture. Now, as you're drawing your pictures, I want you to just be really careful and take your time. They may be simple to draw, but you want to make sure that your picture shows a really good illustration of that shape. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my square. And then I'm going to talk about what that shape must have. Now, the only attribute that I'm not going to be writing in my boxes over here is open or closed. Do you know why I probably won't be writing open or closed? That's right, because all of these 2D shapes that I have right here are closed shapes. We know that these shapes must be closed to be those shapes. So I don't have to write it over here because we already know that that is an attribute for all of our 2D shapes. So I'm going to focus on the sides and the corners of the shape. So the first thing that a square must have is 4 straight sides. But in order to be a square, the sides have to be equal to each other. If the sides are not equal, it's not actually a square. So I'm going to say 4 straight sides, 4 equal sides. So see how I added a little bit of detail about the attributes of that shape? I know it has straight sides, but I said specifically that they're all equal. Now let's talk about the corners. It has 4 corners, but they are a special type of corner. I want you to look right here. These are called square corners. And what that means is, if I took a square and put it in that corner, it would line up perfectly. Those corners are perfectly square. They're not slanted or angled at all. They aren't angled out to be bigger or angled in to be smaller. They're perfectly square. So a square has 4 square corners. Now, I wanted to make sure we talked about this because when you go to your problem set, there's going to be a question that asks you to find the shape that has a different kind of corner. Not a different number of corners, but a different kind of corners. So that's when you're going to focus on, is it a square corner or is it a corner that is slanted out or slanted in? Okay, so now let's go to rectangle. Let's focus on the sides first. So we know that a rectangle has to have 4 sides. But do they have to be equal to each other? Absolutely not. 2 of the sides are longer and 2 are shorter. So a rectangle does not have to have 4 equal sides. As long as it has 4 sides and they are straight, it is a rectangle. And it has to have 4, again, square corners. If the shape does not have square corners, it cannot be a rectangle. If I look at my rectangle here, I see perfect squares in all of those corners. And this is important because when you get to other shapes, they might have 4 straight sides. They might not all be the same length, but if they don't have the square corners, It's not a rectangle. And we'll notice that when we get to these two down here. Okay, so our next shape is a rhombus. Now a rhombus looks similar to a rectangle, but it's almost like they took a rectangle and slanted it on its side. So a rhombus, and it's a little bit trickier to draw. Some also call it a diamond. Okay. A rhombus does have 4 equal sides. And they have to be straight. Now you'll notice that's the same exact thing for square. A square has 4 straight sides, a rhombus has 4 straight sides. A square has 4 equal sides, a rhombus has 4 equal sides. But what makes this shape different than this one? That's right, it has 4 corners, but look carefully at them. They are not perfect squares. These 2 corners right here are bigger than a square. They slant outward, they get a little bit bigger, kind of like an alligator mouth. And these corners right here are a little bit smaller than a square corner, like an alligator closing its mouth. So it has 4 corners, but they don't have to be square. Now the next shape is a trapezoid. This is also a 4-sided shape, but you'll notice something special about the sides. It does have 4 straight sides, no curves. But you'll notice that 2 of the sides are slanted, meaning they go at an angle. So this one is slanted and this one is slanted. And since these 2 are slanted, one of the sides is shorter than the other. Okay. Now, if you notice, it also has 4 corners. Are those corners square corners? Good job. No, they are not square corners. These 2 up here are bigger, like an alligator opening his mouth to eat. And then these 2 down here are smaller than a square corner, like an alligator closing his mouth back down to bite. So I'm going to show you with a highlighter how it's easy to see that those are not square corners. If I draw a square right here, you'll see that that does not line up with the square. These up here do. Same thing for here. They do not line up with a square. But they do have 4 corners. They're just not square. Now the next one's circle. This one's really simple because it doesn't have any corners. So we don't have to think about, are the corners square or are they not square? Because it doesn't have any. And it also has 0 straight sides. It is one big curve. And then our last one is a triangle. How many sides does this one have? That's right, 3 straight sides. Now, does this one have to have 3 equal straight sides? No, it doesn't. A triangle can have 3 sides that are different lengths. Those 2 are longer than that one. That one's the longest, this one's in the middle, and that one's shortest. So it doesn't matter if the sides are equal or not, it's still a triangle. And then of course it has 3 corners. And on triangles, they're special because they might have square corners, but they might not. So if we look at this triangle right here, this one actually has one square corner right here, but the other two are not. On all three of these corners, they are not square corners. And same thing on this one. These are not square corners. So triangles are really interesting in that they might have some square corners, but they might not, and that's okay. It doesn't have to have square corners like a rectangle and a square do. All right, if you need to pause this video so you can finish filling out this chart, you can. And then if you want to use this chart while you do your lesson set, absolutely do that to help you.